James Gabagool Napoli, do I have to raise my volume at you?
How do you know my middle name was Gabagool? Hi, everybody. We're the Skeleton Crew, and today we're going to talk to you about the dinosaur design for Coelophysis in Jurassic World Evolution 2. But before we talk about Coelophysis, we need to introduce ourselves to you. And before we introduce ourselves to you, we need to tell you that something very special is happening on June 17th. We are going to be doing a charity live stream to benefit the Trevor Project, a suicide hotline for LGBT youth. We're going to be streaming from 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. to raise money to donate to the Trevor Project. As you know, June is Pride Month, and we really believe in their mission, and we want to support them as best we can. So tune in on June 17th. We hope to see a lot of you there. We're really excited for our first major fundraising effort. We'll be updating this space periodically with new details about the stream as they're settled. So remember to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already so that you get all of the updates and you know exactly what's going on and when it's all happening. And with that, I'm Dr. James Napoli. I am a postdoctoral research scholar at the North Carolina State University and the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences.
I am Amelia Zietlow. I am a PhD candidate at the American Museum of Natural History.
I'm super doctor Alex Rubenstall. That's better than Jimbo, who's just a normal doctor. It's a PhD thing. You guys wouldn't understand, but it's a real rank. And I'm definitely not just a PhD candidate at Yale University. I'm also a super ultra doctor, just in case Dalton says it's infinity. You can't be better than what I am, just in case Dalton says something.
Well, as Alex has hinted, I'm Dalton Meyer, and I have a Dr. Force Field that blocks everything you say. And I've had it the whole time, even though I didn't say it, but it's active, so it doesn't matter. I'm definitely not just a PhD candidate, also at Yale University.
That's cheating. You can't.
But you know that you know what we are for sure?
Together?
Yeah.
The skeleton.
We're the skeleton crew.
The skeleton crew.
Yeah, that was the worst one yet. So, okay, Dalton, why don't you show us these animals come into the world?
I
Certainly.
think they already did. I just watched one walk by.
They've spoiled themselves a little bit, but we got a whole gaggle running out.
Oh my god.
A cadre. Mask.
Oh, I like the stripies. I didn't know they had stripes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to spoil it. I think these are good.
These are great.
Beautiful, beautiful designs.
Look at them.
Are we going to talk about what their name means?
Yeah.
Coelophysis boweri? What is their name?
So Coelophysis means hollow form.
Wow. Which part means which?
Coelo is hollow, and
Wow,
Physis...
like Silurus.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Silurosaur.
Wow.
Amphicelius. Procelus. Coelacanth. Coelom. The coelom is...
Green.
If you know what the coelom is, you know what the coelom is.
For those who know.
I don't know why that's
If you know, you know.
Chronological.
privy information. It's not like a whatever.
Well, it's a little inside baseball is what I'm saying.
All of this is inside baseball.
What I'm wondering is, does Physis really just mean form? That's always how it's translated.
Yeah.
Physis? I think so.
What
At
else
least
has
that's-
that, root in it?
What about boweri? It's named after a person, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
What about, Brigmophyseter? Or, Physeter? Is that related to Physis?
Physeter is just the genus name of the sperm whale,
Yeah.
which might just be Greek for sperm whale.
What
Yeah,
about
they prob-
Zygapophysis? That's technically a similar physis, at the end.
Yeah, that would make sense as like something form.
Okay.
I'm looking up the Greek because that's definitely Greek.
It is Greek. Yes.
It's all Greek to me.
Ooh, some frame rate issues.
All right. Well, our friends do this. Let's talk a little bit.
You know what's interesting? No, I'm sorry. We're going to talk about this now. Physis is often translated from Greek as meaning nature. And so that's where you get the science of physics from. It's the science of how the world works.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So what you're saying is the beast is hollow in nature?
Right. In nature being this nebulous concept of form.
In vibes.
Right.
Right.
It's got hollow vibes and it's a physicist. That's what you're telling me, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
let's-
he's got a pretty hollow-looking head.
This is true. But what is important to note is that I never knew who this Bauer guy was, but it's named after Georg Bauer, a German paleontologist and neo-Lamarckist, who apparently had similar ideas to Cope's.
You mean eugenics?
Was it even eugenics then? Like, I think that's pre-eugenics. I think this was just, I hate all people who aren't white. Like, Cope didn't even accept Darwinism.
Did he not?
No, he was a neo-Lamarckist as well. So this is...
Big oof for the Cope camp.
I've found our first unrelated stunlock of this video. Let's get a tally going. So
Yeah, educate me.
Yeah, so this is an interesting thing that a lot of people gloss over, right? Darwin's contribution to the field of evolution and anatomy and naturalism, biology, I guess, is the right term, was not the idea that evolution happens. It was specifically identifying a mechanism by which it happens.
Evolution by natural selection.
Right. And a lot of people get a lot of people think the controversial part was evolution. And that was debated at the time. There were certainly people who thought that it didn't occur. But even Darwin's grandfather had been theorizing about evolution. There were a lot of ideas about how it occurred. And the most famous that you've probably heard of is Lamarck's idea that structures are increased in size or complexity or are specialized by their use. And then that's heritable. Now, Lamarckism was taught in a lot of textbooks that I read as a kid and that my parents read as kids as being just completely incorrect. The modern discovery of how gene regulation works and like epigenetic control of gene expression shows that there's actually some truth to the idea that you can have an acquired change that becomes heritable.
Yeah,
Right.
but I mean, that's still like those acquired changes that become heritable are still coded. I've heard the arguments for like Neo-Lamarckism
Right. No, and I
from
mean,
like a genetic standpoint, and I think it's just a co-option of a historic movement to give it like some precedence. But like how epigenetic traits are like acquired is still poorly understood.
oh, absolutely. No, I mean, I'm not saying that it's showing that Lamarck was correct about it. Like, fundamentally, a lot of it's genetically coded.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, Lamarck's central idea is not completely incorrect. It just doesn't seem to be the main mechanism. What was controversial about what Darwin proposed was that the thing that caused evolution to happen was just survival of the fittest, as he put it, which, of course, he took pains to emphasize did not mean the strongest or the fastest or the angriest or the,
Most
the most
racist.
dominant. Right, or the most racist. He
A nuance lost on
Right.
the audience of his time.
Right, exactly. No, he took pains to explain that fittest just meant best suited to survive and reproduce in whatever circumstances the animal or plant or organism encountered, which is how we still understand the idea. What I think a lot of our discussion of things lacks, because most people stop learning about biology at some point in high school, is that, we learn about it as Lamarck had this stupid idea, and everybody laughed at him. And then Darwin had this good idea, and everybody was like, oh yeah. And there were decades where Darwinism as a version of evolutionary thought was hotly debated and was only one of many competing ideas. And many of the prominent paleontologists in the late 1800s to early 1900s were actually not Darwinists. They didn't think evolution happened that way. They thought evolution happened.
Well, and there was also Wallace, but
Well, right.
that's why you never become second author.
That's why you never become second author. And also, I think Wallace is like Darwin and Wallace didn't apparently feel a lot of competition. Like Wallace, from what when I took a class on this stuff in college, we read a lot of their correspondence and everything. Like Wallace was like, okay, yeah, you talk about it first. You had the idea first. Like it was a pretty,
No, they were
it was
pretty
not
cordial.
hostile. Yeah. No, it's like, there's a lot of efforts to make it more of a thing where like Darwin beat him or something. It's like they talked and Wallace was like, yeah, you go talk about it first. It's fine.
Now, not to fillet the of Yale University too much, because it doesn't deserve it most of the time. But just to stand our boy, Mr. Othniel, Mr. Charles, Mr. Marsh, a king, not really, but
He
a guy.
certainly did some not so great things, but
He did some bad stuff.
a
But
complicated.
in terms of the discussion between Lamarckism and Darwinism, whereas Cope was going, oh, I think if it worked out a lot, it would get big, or maybe, being a dweeb and not doing as much dinosaur naming. And I guess he did some mammal stuff, but like, whatever. Um, Marsh was sending Darwin like weird birds with teeth. He's like, yo, check this shit out. And Darwin was like, that's wild. That's very supportive of my theory.
It is.
So like, Marsh, correct more.
Although, speaking of birds with teeth and things like that, Marsh did turn down buying, I believe, the Berlin specimen of
I'm so
Archaeopteryx.
mad about it. Let's not talk about it.
He was like, oh, that's definitely fake. So he didn't buy Archaeopteryx. It's like,
All right, but we don't know what Cope thought, so maybe Cope also thought it was fake. So
Yeah, we don't know what he thought. But Cope was a
Additionally-
neo-lawhatist.
in relation to our animal today, SEE-lophysis, do we all know who found SEE-lophysis?
Well, wait, I wasn't done yet. I wanted to talk about one more cool thing.
Okay, fine.
So there was another theory that we really don't talk about anymore, which is that, and so this is the real fun one. So I would make an argument, and this is something that could be explored. Like, well, I'm not even going to go into this. So there was another secret third thing in terms of evolutionary ideas, which was orthogenesis or aristogenesis. Orthogenesis, and these are related, but they're slightly distinct. Orthogenesis was the idea that organisms and lineages had a particular tendency that they were going to evolve in, and that it was predetermined in some way.
Okay.
Like that.
My God.
Right. And I mean, that's usually what's invoked, I think, in a lot of earlier writings. Again, maybe one could see some truth to it in the sense that you have a phylogenetic legacy of what traits you have available to you, and it will control what evolutionary pathways are open to some degree. And I think ideas that were related to this, even though they don't seem to be, like, it's pretty clearly not how it works, but like Dalton and Amelia, as you can attest, lizards lose their limbs a lot.
yeah.
Right. So I think that could be framed in the argument of like the squamate lineage has an orthogenetic trend toward limb loss. It is something that like will happen because they are supposed to do it. I think it's probably something inherent in how they regulate limb development that makes it very easy to not have them. But
I think that ties into a lot of like ideas about how certain groups do, like, not just like squamates involving limblessness, but there's a lot of things that appear many times in different clades, and kind of the idea that whatever kind of developmental mechanisms they have predispose certain animal groups to very easily go down certain anatomical pathways.
right. I mean,
And Dolo was full of shit.
Dolo was really full of shit. I mean, one idea that you could also, this ties into something we talked about in a prior video. I forget which now. I've edited so many in the last week that it is just, my mind is a forest of Skeleton Crew videos. But one could argue that dinosaurs are predisposed to become bird-like and fly, based on how many separate times they seem to achieve flight. I think that view is based mostly on how many fossils are missing, right? Like, we see what looks like kind of a connect-the-dots pattern of acquiring avian modifications. It's really like this dense bush of evolutionary novelty that we've got occasional branches on, and so it looks like a linear trend. But this is the idea. What I'm getting at is aristogenesis, which is orthogenesis, but all organisms are inherently predisposed to evolve toward higher and higher levels of organization. And the word higher and higher is used here because this version of evolution was really loved by the eugenicists. And that was that every lineage has, like, the pinnacle it will attain. Do you want to guess what the pinnacle is?
No.
You don't want to know?
No.
I think I know what they thought it was.
I think you know what they thought the pinnacle was. This
White
was...
men?
It was certainly... It was not only white men. It was white British men.
Yeah.
This
Sure.
was the version of evolutionary biology that was championed by our good friend Henry Fairfield Osborn, who explicitly talked about them. Right. Anyway, I mean, that's obviously a little, like, glib. That version of evolutionary theory led to a lot of suffering, and we are going to talk about that at some point when we can do it justice, because it's a really heavy topic, and we wouldn't want to do it in a glib way. But suffice it to say, evolutionary theory was wacky early on, and there was a lot of competing camps and ideas about how the process worked. Darwinism really settled because we discovered the mechanism by which heritable information is spread. Right,
And by we,
I mean us.
The skeleton crew.
literally us. We went back in time. We grew some pea plants and pretended to be what was he? Dutch, Swiss?
I don't, if you rearrange
thought
all
it
the
was
letters,
German.
it spells
No.
great.
I'm gonna find out because it's gonna bother me. He could. Gregor Mendel
Mendel?
was Austrian.
Austrian. Never mind.
None of the things we said.
Right, Austrian, the coward's German.
Did Germany even exist at that point?
No.
No, it didn't. Well, I
Yeah,
think
all
by
right.
the end of Mendel's life, it did.
Yeah, so he was born in 1822, died in 1884. Germany. Well, maybe not. Hold on. Germany as we know it today was founded. Come on, Wikipedia, be faster. I should know this. I knew this at one point in time. This is really an embarrassment.
Wasn't it the
Aren't
late
you German?
1870s?
The German Confederation was formed in 1815. The unification was 1866. The German Empire in 1871. The German whatever. No, well,
So he died
Well,
in
no.
Germany.
no, because then it was the Weimar Republic in the early 1900s.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
Germany as we know it today was founded by, in the strictest sense, it was founded in 1991.
right.
like-
Germans.
Yeah,
Well-
no, that's true. I would say, I guess, if you want to count the German Confederation, which, if I could see it on a map, yes, I would. It's not even the same. But anyways, if you want to count the German Confederation as modern Germany, you could say 1815. The end of that was 1866. So I guess you could also say 1866.
What
Damn,
city
what
did
a-
he die in? Because, I mean, he may have just actually been Austrian and lived and died in Austria.
Wasn't he
Well-
on some mountain his whole life?
Monastery somewhere.
I guess I
right?
just always think of monasteries being on mountains.
Yeah, they were often in towns, Alex. They would own
All right.
property.
Well, it's very easy to get raided by the Danes that way.
Not
he
raided.
he died in what is now the Czech Republic.
Oh,
Okay. Well, that's
So he was
unexpected.
born in Austrian Silesia.
Holy we should talk about Sulphysis.
Yeah.
nah.
Wait, he was born in
Anyways.
Silesia. He was born. That's where some Triassic things are from.
Steelophysis,
Hey,
So Coelophysis.
It's also
it's a dinosaur.
It sure is.
Where did we leave off on Steelophysis? We were talking about
We said what its
Its
name
name.
means.
have we said anything about when it was named or
Um,
when
No.
it was found?
Well,
So so actually I don't know when it was found. I know that it was named in 1887, I believe, by Edward Drinker Cope. It was actually originally referred to Silurus, which had been named by Marsh. But Cope ended up referring it to its own genus, which was Coelophysis, 2 years later, I think. The holotype is actually so the holotype for Coelophysis boweri is bat. It's I think it's a femur and some scraps of other bone.
oh wow.
it's there's a little bit of vertebrae, right? That's what the hollow
Yeah,
came
yeah,
from, right?
yeah, I
It
think
was,
there's
wasn't it pleuroseals on the vertebrae?
I believe so.
where is
It's
the
not particularly pneumatic, but yeah. Anyway, so later, tons of these things would be found at the Ghost Ranch. Well, those are good carrots. Sorry, in New Mexico, right? It's New Mexico,
Right.
And
Yes.
Where?
Yes.
Yeah. No. Ghost Ranch is in New
the
Mexico.
American Museum would dig up a whole mess of these things, and when I say a whole mess, dozens of things in a block. There are, I think, over 100 Coelophysis boweri specimens in these mass kills. Yale's got a few in our basement,
Yeah.
and I think that the deposit is somewhere between 220 and 210 million years old. So it's not the earliest. It's a very, very early theropod dinosaur. part of what we call Neo-theropods, but it's not as early as something like Herrerasaurus.
Yeah.
And while the skeleton, I've looked at the skull quite a bit. While it certainly looks a little more theropody than say something like Herrerasaurus, there are kind of a few more familiar theropod traits, including in how like the sinuses of the face are developed. It's still a very primitive theropod compared to, I don't know, something like your average Coelophysis. And there are a lot of things. It's like Herrerasaurus, like Jimbo said in one of our earlier videos, which is it's shocking we know as much about this animal as we do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have. I'm thinking there's a big block of Coelophysis in the big bone room at the AMNH. So that if you're wondering what that refers to, that is the room where we keep all the big bones that don't fit in drawers. So the AMNH has three. Yes, the AMNH has 3 separate reptile fossil collections spaces, and the big bone room has all of the big stuff, and the big block of Coelophysis has, oh my god, I want to say 6 or 7 individuals. I don't know. I found it on a whim once, and there's like thankfully someone has a little picture where they've colored in which all the individuals are, so you can actually see them in the block. And on display on the 4th floor, if you come visit us, if you're thinking, man, I don't think I've ever seen a Coelophysis fossil, you probably have, and it's one of the 2 that are in a block together. That's kind of, I don't know, one of the canonical dinosaur fossils that you see in textbooks and regular books and documentaries and everything else. And that specimen, those 2 specimens, I don't know, they always Photoshop out the second one. I don't know why. But one of them or both of them have, I guess they both have an interesting story to them in not just their skeleton, but what is affiliated with them.
Right. Yeah, the little guy inside.
Yeah, well, I thought it was several little guys.
It might be multiple
A few
individuals.
little guys.
At least one in each of the 2.
Okay.
Notably, the one that I think is kind of cropped out and shown more often is the neotype of Coelophysis.
Yeah.
So as we discussed, the holotype is apparently pretty fragmentary and scrappy, and when that is the case, occasionally the holotype being the specimen that all other individuals assigned to this species are supposed to be compared to and to share the same features with in order to say, oh, this is the same animal, it's the same as the holotype. For modern organisms where we can maybe have the whole thing preserved, it's usually not an issue unless it's destroyed. But for fossils, if someone, especially in the past, names a species off of something that's very fragmentary, and then it's either lost or a extremely better specimen is found that overlaps with the holotype, then we might erect a neotype, which is to say, hey, this isn't the same specimen that the species was named for, but it's a much better specimen for comparative purposes, and so we're going to use this one now. And that's what happened with Coelophysis.
And you better believe that shit happens all the time.
Yeah. Although
People love naming. Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Alex. I thought you were done.
I was just saying, paleontologists of yesteryear love naming fragmentary fossils,
Mm-hmm.
and then putting the remains in a drawer that someone won't find for another 100 years.
Literally, just before we started this recording, Dalton and I were discussing neotype type discussion things.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting that, when Dalton, this is just to clarify a point Dalton made in case it's not clear. You don't just do this when you're like, I like my specimen better.
Yes.
You're like, there are scientific problems with basing the species on this specimen. A type is really important, right? That is the reference by which you decide whether something belongs to the species or not. And it's possible for an incomplete specimen to be diagnostic.
Yeah.
Right, but
what might some of these problems be? What's something for our audience? Say they were to stumble upon a fossil and write it up. What would you not want your holotype to be?
Blown up.
Destroyed.
just
Fragmentary. You would also probably want
destroyed in World War II is, I think, what they were getting at.
Yeah.
Right. I'm trying to do a little constructive
Yeah, no,
bit here.
That's a good bit.
Things we look for in the holotypes. Is it complete? Is it even a little bit complete? Is the material all confidently from the same animal? Which is an issue. Is it mature? Is it what stage of its ontogeny is it in? You don't necessarily want to name a taxon a juvenile. It happens a lot, especially for things where you only have one fossil. But it's difficult to understand what the fully developed traits are in the adult, so you might miss stuff.
Right. I would add to that, it's ideal that the type is actually diagnostic in some way. So one thing that is common is that we do things a little bit stratigraphically, where we say, we have not found, say, a large theropod dinosaur fossil from this rock formation in this place before. And so it becomes a new species, even if it doesn't have any diagnostic traits that would help you differentiate it from other things. Because you basically are saying it's different because it's the only thing from this time and place that we know of, so it's got to be something new. And that can cause problems when that is done for something extremely fragmentary, like, say, a couple of metatarsals. Mm-hmm. This is not to say that it shouldn't be done. Like, there are rock formations where fossil material is just not as well preserved and as much scrappier, so you are limited. But if the only thing you can say is this is from a different place or a different time, that's not based on the anatomy of the specimen, and so that doesn't really help if you find more material elsewhere that might be from the same species or might not be.
It's okay to just say you can write up a little paper where you're like, we have found a, I don't know, Ceratosaur indeterminate in the late Jurassic or whatever. You don't have to name it. You don't have apomorphies. Please don't name it.
I would like to get back to the little guy in its belly, which we kind of dropped the ball on. My understanding is that the little guy is currently interpreted to be a crocodilomorph.
Mm-hmm. You are correct.
Right. This led to the idea, though, that, well, I think at some point, wasn't it even floated that it was live-bearing and that was like an embryo, like a fetus, rather, in gestation?
I don't know.
I think that was a consideration, but it was one that was not like particularly supported. I think it was more like, hey, we have like what is probable gut contents, but maybe it means live birth.
Right. No, I mean, the main interpretation was, as Dalton's getting at, that it was a baby SEE-lophysis that had been eaten by the adult.
Cannibalism.
Right.
How similar are these animals to SEE-lophysis that they're being mistaken for SEE-lophysis?
I mean,
not particularly. There's not a ton of material.
Yeah, it's not like they had a skull of something that was obviously different and thought it was a baby. Like, it's basically long bones, right?
I think so. I mean, I'll remind our audience that your Triassic crocodilomorph and your average theropod are more similar than you'd care to know.
And like, I understand that. What I'm wondering is why they would make the jump to cannibalism if it was so fragmentary. Well,
so, I mean, there are these huge mass blocks, and SEE-lophysis are basically almost all that's in there.
Right.
Like, they're generally monogeneric. That being said, there are crocodilomorphs.
Yeah, so the idea was that it was a baby SEE-lophysis and that they ate their young. I'm torn on this because most animals will eat their young.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's entirely possible they did. But what is in their gut is not a baby SEE-lophysis.
Yeah. This is my personal bugbear with the way a lot of popular science framing of these discoveries is made, where it's like, we used to think this was a baby and that they ate their young, but now we know that they didn't eat their young and that's actually a baby crocodile. Like, we know one of those things.
Yeah.
It's not even a baby crocodile. It's just a
the
little
same
crocodile.
thing that happened with Oviraptor.
I was about to bring that up. Right.
Oh, then I'll let...
No, you go ahead. You brought it up.
No, it's your baby.
We all care about it. You should, yeah. You
sure. I do work on them. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Oviraptor, as Alex said. The idea had always been Oviraptor was fossilized, caught in the act, predating upon the nest of eggs. And then we found more of them, and we realized they're in a brooding position and that they're actually on their own nests. That's neat. It doesn't mean they didn't eat eggs. It means they didn't eat their own eggs.
They got a good mouth for egg eating, too.
They've got a great mouth for egg eating.
Eggs are
it
great.
doesn't even mean they didn't eat their own eggs. It just means that that's not what that fossil was doing.
Right. I mean, they presumably wouldn't have eaten their own eggs. The species wouldn't last very long if they were, like, laying them and then immediately feeding upon them.
Ooh, a treat.
Do birds ever eat, like, eggs that like dead eggs in their nests for nutrients?
I think they'll do that. I think they'll like reclaim the nutrient, but they seem to wait until that happens. Yeah, so I mean, it's just, this is a thing that many people are not intrinsically good at. Science is hard. And I was talking with Roger Benson about this recently, where like we were just kind of talking about the process of doing a PhD. One of the recent times I was at the AMNH. And
When was this?
A couple weeks ago.
Okay, I'm watching you.
What are you watching? I can go back.
No, I know.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
So I was talking with Roger Benson about this, and we were talking about the fact that a PhD really has to be fundamentally something that changes how you see the world around you. And you're probably not really getting a lot out of it if you treat it like kind of like you're doing an MBA or something. Like learning to be a scientist and getting a PhD. And one of the reasons that we tend to trust research from people with PhDs more intrinsically is that like doing science and excluding hypotheses is actually something that's kind of counterintuitive for people. And it's a mindset that you constantly need to reframe yourself into, right? Like in science, what you are mostly doing is trying to falsify an idea, not prove it. So you can find all of the evidence in support of something that you want. It doesn't actually mean it's true. You show something's the case by falsifying alternatives.
Right. I must be doing a great PhD because my mind frame has become so doomer and cynical.
Yes, but it's not how we normally look for evidence for things, right? Like you're trying to you're trying to establish what it's not, and hopefully by exclusion leave what it is. Not establish what it is and never address the possibilities of what it's not. Issues with this creep into the literature a lot. It's more rampant than you'd think. But it's something that I think is often lost in public dissemination of science, where like, you know, there's a tendency for media to take the really easy story and we say, we used to think this, but not this, actually this. Not all of those are logically equivalent.
Right.
So it's very possible Coelophysis ate its own young. Most animals will do it at some point. It can often be a part of a reproductive strategy. There's a lot of ways it happens. We just know that that wasn't a baby Coelophysis. Looking at a Coelophysis skeleton on the other monitor here, anatomically what I find very interesting about Coelophysis is that in the skull, it looks a lot like other theropod dinosaurs. Not as derived as Coelosaurs or Carnosaurs or anything, obviously, but it looks like a theropod. Postcranially, a lot of the vibes it gives are less traditionally dinosaur-y.
Yeah.
The main thing is that the ilium, the top bone in the pelvis that kind of forms a long blade that runs front to back, in theropod dinosaurs forms this really, really elongate blade-like rectangular structure. It's really quite elaborated. It supports a much more heavily expanded thigh musculature. It's really integral to the locomotor apparatus.
Right.
In Coelophysis, it's a fairly narrow ilium, very much
that's
like what
pretty
you see in
crocky.
lizards and crocs, right?
Now, in terms of like primitive features on Coelophysis, something that I think is interesting, and I think we actually talk about this briefly in our Monolophosaurus video when we kind of broached the topic of Lenosaurus, is that there is disturbing levels of interspecific variation in Coelophysis. And this is like a little more, I'm more inclined to believe that this is actual interspecific variation because this is a wash of all the same animals. But a recent publication that looked at like their hands is like, there is variation in the bones that contribute, like what bones you have in your fingers in Coelophysis. They're primitive theropods, so they have the remnants of D4. I think just the metatarsal, or do they have unguals? I'm sorry, phalanges.
Metacarpal, you mean?
Did I say metatarsal?
You did. It's okay.
Oh, geez. Oh, oy vey. No, yeah. So they still have the metacarpal. But there's apparently really surprising variation within Coelophysis bauri. And I know this has led some people to posit that there might actually be kind of a unknown diversity in what could be called a species complex. Perhaps there are more species of Coelophysis. We can talk about the phylogeny part a little bit more. But yeah, so weird variability. We also have a lot of young Coelophysis. So there's like an idea of the ontogeny. The young Coelophysis have these very short skulls. There's exciting work coming out kind of about early theropod ontogeny, so I can't say too much more. But yeah, so like really dozens of these animals, and an interesting, one of the few really good looks we get at within theropods at like a genuine assemblage of animals at different growth stages, and like genetic, a phenotypic diversity within a dinosaur genus and a species in this case. Also, you can see in the model that their heads are kind of boxy. And a lot of the SEE-lophysis you'll see, they kind of have these very narrow, the fossilized skulls are incredibly narrow, but a lot of them are crushed. And I remember the first time I was looking at Syntarsus, and I was looking at another SEE-lophysis skull. I'm like, wow, this is shockingly narrow. And then I kept reading, and they're like, found out that a lot of this is distortion, even plastic deformation, which is when the rock like changes the bone, which is one of the great frustrations of paleontology, which is you don't know if the morphology you're looking at sometimes is original. It can be deformed by heat and pressure. So yeah, the reconstruction they have in this game, I believe, is fairly accurate in terms of like kind of the cross section of the skull. And they have a little kink with the premax and the max, which is kind of this early theropod and Archosaur feature.
And something that appears in a lot of different lineages independently. I mean, I've seen reconstructions of dromaeosaur skulls with that kink to some degree.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's pretty substantial. Things like Dilophosaurus.
Yeah.
Numerous Archosauriforms, like Proterosuchus and stuff like that. But yeah, it's, I think, for catching stuff, right? Like, it's to grab little things. SEE-lophysis is not eating animals larger than its head, probably. It's grabbing small little verts and scarfing them down. Gobble, gobble, it says.
I mean, I don't know. I think the things are...
Alex are very primitive.
The gut contents that we have, if you reassemble it, I think it might be larger than the SEE-lophysis' head.
Okay, but it's not... This is not an animal that's like attacking things big. It's taking small prey.
Yes.
SEE-lophysis is also another interesting feature of its anatomy is that it's one of the earliest diverging theropods that we have a preserved wishbone, a furculiform.
Wow, that's so cool. This is not cut at all.
It's not cut. We remembered to say this at the correct time. We didn't film this at the end. But kind of one of the huge things. So dinosaurs were proposed to be related to birds way back over 100 years ago by Huxley. But then there was this argument made that, hey, they don't have wishbones. And then an appeal to this thing called Dollo's law, which is that a complex structure doesn't re-evolve. So it's like, hey, they can't be related to birds. They don't have a wishbone. Although at the time, apparently, in Allosaurus, a furcula had been misidentified as, I think, Australia. So elements were known, but just weren't recognized. And as more and more theropods were found, and the dinosaur bird hypothesis kind of ratcheted back into the minds of people, these structures were identified, and they were identified in SEE-lophysis. So we know that the fusion of the clavicles is present as far down the tree as SEE-lophysis, which is a big deal because that's an important bird feature.
Right.
Additionally, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, that's like such a critical smoking gun of evolutionary transformation. Like, that's one of the most classical things you could ask for. And 20 years ago, that being in Velociraptor, one of the most bird-like dinosaurs, was huge news. And now it's like, oh yeah, actually theropods had that almost from the beginning. They had that the whole time. It's amazing what can be absent from the fossil record.
He had a furcula the whole time.
Big twist.
Wait, it's all furcula?
Always has been. Now, the representation of SEE-lophysis in this video game is a scaly guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be at least behoove us to talk about for like 2 minutes some interesting hypotheses about its integument based on its distribution.
Right. So
I think, go ahead.
It probably would have been living in areas that got too cold at times of the year or at night for it to have been featherless and been warm-blooded. it would have not been able to survive. So that proposes that it was probably covered in like insulatory layer of feathers. The nature of those we don't really know. I would imagine something far more like a ratite, like an emu, than like
almost
bird
certainly
feathers.
nothing panaceous. Something like compsognathid, simple.
Right.
And this is a hypothesis that's consistent with the most current reconstructions of when a filamentous integument evolved. Probably common to the common ancestor of dinosaurs.
Right, and pterosaurs.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, possibly, even earlier than dinosaurs.
Yeah. So in terms of the idea that there are multiple species of Coelophysis, well, first of all, there are other species that are commonly classified within the genus Coelophysis. This is clearly supposed to be Coelophysis boweri.
Yes, we can tackle that in the phylogeny discussion.
Right, but in terms of whether the Ghost Ranch blocks are multiple species, it seems unlikely, but many groups of modern animals that are skeletally very similar do form mixed species assemblages.
Right.
So it is possible. Now, these tend to be animals that are probably quite a bit more intelligent than dinosaurs are.
Especially Coelophysis.
Well, right. I mean, like, I'm talking about primates, right?
Right.
Guenon monkeys in Africa will commonly, I think they'll herd in groups of 3 or 4 species, and they just live in a mixed species troop. They are skeletally almost indistinguishable. They're all members of, I think, the same genus or the same handful of genera. Really closely related. Remarkably different in external coloration. And we actually know from experimental evidence that they recognize each other based on their color cues. It's something we can't ever test for dinosaurs.
Orangutans. They befriend gibbons. It's very cool.
Right. But I mean, like, these animals are almost indistinguishable from the bones. They're the same size, they're the same everything, and they forage together. And they have different food they subspecialize on, and they help keep each other safe from predators. But what happens is they've got these really brightly colored faces. And so we know from, like, putting them in a Clockwork Orange style chair in a lab and tracking their pupil movements, that they tend to look in the areas where these color patterns are when shown images of other primates or humans. And so, like, they're looking for those color patterns. I forget the exact details of the paper, but it's fascinating.
It's like a cooperative. It's like a primate cooperative.
If you want.
So you could say nature red in tooth and claw, but the red being the glorious revelation of communism.
Right, of course. What I'm getting at is that study is obviously impossible.
I fucked up my camera focus for that.
You did.
God.
You did. So, like, you know how there's a lot of variation in frill morphology in Triceratops? But it doesn't seem to be taxonomic? Makes you wonder. Right? Could they have been forming, like, some sort of mixed species assemblage where the frill is really important for recognizing conspecifics? It's brightly colored and differently colored for each species. But what that looks like in the fossil record is that there's a tremendous degree of variation in, like, kind of these exaggerated cranial ornaments without anything else. It's possible. It's probably untestable. And there's certainly no evidence in favor of that. I guess what I'm saying
we should all just lump it in the same genus for no reason.
Well, I mean, Triceratops can be in the same genus. That's fine. But I know what you're joking about, Alex. And so, anyway, I guess what I'm saying is it's possible that all the Coelophysis at Ghost Ranch are multiple species. They're probably all one species, though. And it's not that surprising that an early theropod would show a lot of variation in areas of the skeleton that are evolving quickly. Right? Like, that's kind of exactly what you would expect. Like, hand evolution is proceeding quite rapidly in theropod dinosaurs. So you would expect that area would be variable in early members of the group.
Right.
Yes. And I think causally it's important to recognize it's not that the hand being very variable is because it's evolving fast. Rather, it's evolving fast because whatever mechanisms are in charge of controlling the morphology seem to be pretty loose. And so you can get a lot of variation for natural selection to work on.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and this is something that, like, is, I think, observable in, like, Evo-Devo stuff. Right? Like the patterns of developmental influence as you, like, go distally, and as far as expression goes, are more variable. That's why you usually, like, I think it's why polydactyly is more common than like developing an entire limb. There's less constraint on the development of those regions.
Right.
I could be wrong. I recall reading something about that somewhere.
No, there was a recent paper about it. It actually shows that evolutionary novelty is concentrated in the later developing elements of the arm.
I knew I read something. I knew I could read.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, it is maybe unsurprising that the things that happen really early in development will be more canalized. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to grow a human without a backbone or without a brain.
Have you ever met a... No,
I was gonna make a similar joke. I'm like, have you met?
Have you met a couple of our viewers who unsubscribed after we made the big announcement?
Yeah.
Right, no, but it's hard to grow humans without major parts of human anatomy that are quite early developing, but it's really easy to make humans with slightly different heights. Because, like, that's something that happens real late in your development. And so that's something you'd expect to be more variable.
All right, cool. All right. How about we talk about our favorite subject here on the Skeleton Crew, which should really be the phylogeny crew.
Right. We like zeros and ones here.
And
Sometimes a 2. And if I'm really feeling frisky, a 3. Ordered, unordered.
sometimes an 8.
Oh, you've got 8. I go up to 5 or 6, I think, in mine.
Yeah, I don't think I have any characters that go up to 8.
I've got some characters that go up to 8. I've got like 1.
Is that like vertebral count?
Yeah. Mhm.
Is it ordered? Obviously, it's ordered.
You better believe it's ordered.
Gotta be ordered. It's vertebral count. Anyway, sorry. Yes, so Coelophysis, as we kind of said earlier, is what is called a Neo-Theropod. And this is kind of erected because there are some things that are a little farther down the tree that are relatively uncertain phylogenetic position, things like Tawa, Eodromeus, and then the Herrerasaurs, which sometimes are theropods and sometimes aren't. But Coelophysis is, for all intents and purposes, a very early theropod.
And it's called a Neo-Theropod because it's in the Matrix, correct?
Yes, very good.
It's in everyone's
Wow.
matrix, in fact.
That sucked all the wind out of my sail.
That's what I'm here for.
Yes, good joke. Yeah, so Coelophysis itself belongs to a clade called Coelophysis. I think it's a super family. Coelophysoids, which, super families, all those ranked clades are fake. All those ranked, like a phylum's not a real thing. It's a name we gave to something. Only species are even a little bit real, and I say a little bit for a reason. But genus, family, order, all that shit's made up. It's just arbitrary terms. Anyway, there are other things within this clade, like Coelophysis. It's a group that exists from the late Triassic into the early Jurassic. They don't make it past the early Jurassic, as far as we know. And they're I think they're found on like every continent. There's North America, obviously, Coelophysis. There are some in South America. Things like Procompsognathus in Europe are Coelophysoids. There are a few South African species. Magnaphosaurus, we'll talk about.
Anything from Antarctica?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's something from the formation that Coelophysaurus is from. Someone check. Fact check me.
I'll check that right now.
And there are Chinese Coelophysoids from the early Cretaceous in Yunnan too. So
Early Cretaceous?
early Jurassic. My goodness. My goodness.
I was like,
I was
oh my God.
excited.
Several nature papers.
So yeah, it's a group that appears to have been quite like had a proper radiation and a global distribution in their time.
Perhaps Pangean.
Yeah, no, probably. And they're not huge. It's a dinosaur. Coelophysis is kind of, I don't want to say an average size, but some of them, like Procompsognathus, are like a meter-ish, a little more. And there are other ones that sometimes get lumped into the family, or the super family. I should also do air quotes for family, that are bigger than Coelophysis. But this is not a clade that's producing like mega theropods as we think about them. Unless Gojirasaurus is one, because I think Gojirasaurus is big.
The Gojirasaurus isn't that big. It's like Dilophosaurus sized.
Okay, so like
Yeah.
a decently sized animal. But
Yeah, no, not tiny. Just not huge.
so what's the deal with the Antarctic? Because now I'm curious.
I'm looking into it. There is an indeterminate maybe Coelophysoid.
There we go.
It was previously considered Glacialosaurus. It is the distal end of a femur.
Nice.
Hey man, they very recently named a new dinosaur form on the distal end of the femur.
Oh
so.
yeah, I mean it's a diagnostic area of the bone. I'm not saying that means it's not what it is, but it's not like it's a complete skeleton that is easy to diagnose.
No, yeah, sure. It's not as nice as something like Coelophysis.
No, which
But
is
yeah, so-
beautifully preserved. I always forget that.
So decently long-lived in geological time, and widely distributed. They largely look. I don't want to say they look the same, but there's a pretty consistent morphology. Sometimes the snouts are so. Coelophysis is kind of neat and a little weird when you really look at it because the face is really long, like not in a way that you're like, oh yeah, Coelophysis, early theropods, but then you really look at it, like, oh my god, this maxilla just keeps on going and going. How far does that maxilla go, baby? All the way to the premax.
That was one
yeah,
of the
so-
worst things we've said on this channel. That was
It's fine.
It was
That's
great.
really bad.
That was
That's really
fantastic.
Yeah, so
Good.
there are things. There's a whole mess with like Syntarsus and Magnaposaurus and Coelophysis rodensis, which we'll talk about in a sec. But yeah, so some of those, I think some of them are reconstructed to have like crests, kind of Dilophosaurus. I don't know if those are real. I've looked at the Syntarsus scan, and it looks like, and perhaps I'm misremembering, but it looks like the frontals are just getting crushed. Like the frontals and nasals are being crushed up to look like a crest.
Well,
I could be wrong. I haven't looked at it in a while.
And by Syntarsus, you mean Megapnosaurus.
we've mentioned the names have come up a couple of times, so I want to bring it up just as a point. Dilophosaurus and Cryolophosaurus, which are not coelophysoids, but were at one point were they actually considered to be coelophysoids, like in the literature?
So
or that was
historically,
kind of-
they were in this group, kind of Ceratosauria, which was this kind of what was conceived to be this really early radiation of theropods, which included ceratosaurs, coelophysoids, and things like Dilophosaurus and stuff. And I think, honestly, I kind of remember Dilophosaurus maybe being closely related to coelophysoids maybe earlier in the 90s, but
Yeah, no, I mean...
gun to my head, I couldn't tell you.
What happened to Coelophysis kayentacati? What is that now?
I think that's Syntarsus. No, that's wrong, because that's from the Kayenta. Somebody please sort out the Coelophysis.
Oh, it's
Please.
Coelophysis kayentacati. Got it.
Yeah, I think it's just been lumped into Bowery for now.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the one I've seen that scan of that you guys have.
it's worth it. The scan's very bad. There's a lot of the Kayenta stuff does not scan well.
That's a real shame because it looks like it should.
It does, but it doesn't. So here we are. Yeah, we'll probably get a comment, but we're not going to get a comment because you're going to watch the whole video and you're going to hear us say, which is that Syntarsus was a small coelophysoid theropod that was named. But then someone said, Syntarsus is the name of a beetle. So it has precedence, and you can't name something else the same name. And so it was...
Unless it's a plant.
Unless it's plant. Well, what I was going to say is this happens all the time, and there are a ton of insects that have the same name as other things, and no one cares. And the worlds of, etymology and dinosaur paleontology don't overlap. And I'm going to make a controversial statement, which is it's probably fine that they had the same name.
Yeah. Well, you can tell how much they don't overlap by the fact that you called entomology etymology.
I'm going to get some comments on that one.
Yeah. No, so Syntarsus was a beetle. Laelaps was the original name
It
for
is, right?
Tryptosaurus.
I mean,
It
it's
is a
still
beetle.
Syntarsus.
It's still a beetle. And so the specimens that became Syntarsus, or that had been Syntarsus, have generally been reclassified. And I'm trying Yes. So Syntarsus was first proposed for coelophysoid remains from Africa.
Okay, that's the South African one.
That's the South African one originally. And that has now become, that was Syntarsus rhodesiensis.
So that's the Magnaposaurus. That's Magnaposaurus now.
Megapnosaurus, yes.
Agapnosaurus. Okay,
Right.
thank
which,
you.
which very controversially means it was a joke name come up with by the entomologists who figured the problem out, which made everybody mad because Megapnosaurus means big dead lizard. And they just, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And they were just like so done with the dinosaur problem. They were just like, just call it big dead lizard and that's it. But that's officially the name. And a lot of people are upset about that.
Yeah.
Why- I don't care. I'm mad. That's awesome.
We're still referring to it as Syntarsus in this video because it's just kind of ingrained in the popular culture. Like I recognize that's not its actual name, but it's easier to come out of my brain.
To me, it's associated with this very iconic bit of art, right? Like the Syntarsus art. I think the art of Syntarsus with feathers that I think GSP did, right?
Well, it was Bob Backer first. GSP was copying him.
Backer did it first?
Yeah.
I think that was
we'll put it in the video, but it was the first.
I think that was probably the first art I saw when I was like 5 of a dinosaur with feathers. And I remember it just like, I'm like, whoa, what? And it looks really cool. Like the actual like art and color on it, like, and all the stripes kick ass.
Yeah.
Syntarsus for me is always, and the reason I remember it's from Africa too, is always just linked to this childhood PC dinosaur game that I played. That was like a learning game for kids. I think it was called Dinosaur Adventure 3D.
I remember this game.
You played and you had to like collect all these eggs of these dinosaurs. And at one point you go to an area and it's in Africa, and the little Parasaurolophus character is like, that's Syntarsus. And I was like, that's a memory that will live on forever for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, Syntarsus is at this point just the common name.
Yeah.
Is it like that's what reminds you it's always African, not it's a species name?
I don't think of the species name too often.
But it's named after Rhodesia, which is not the name of the country anymore. Rhodesia was Zimbabwe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that. Yes, yeah. So it was named after there. So what I'm getting at, or what I'm trying to bring up, and constantly thwarted on, is that then a North American specimen from the Chinle Formation was referred to the genus Syntarsus, and that was Syntarsus chianticati after the Chinle Formation. That's early Jurassic. That is the specimen that I know Alex and I have looked at CT data from. That is currently, I think, without a confident genus referral. It's usually just lumped into Coelophysis now. So it's Coelophysis chianticati.
Someone figure this out. Get on it.
Right.
I don't have time right now.
Nobody does. I think there is a little bit of a push to lump Megapnosaurus into Coelophysis if they're sister taxa as well, to get rid of the name Megapnosaurus because it was clearly done in derision.
Yeah, but it's funny and good. Also, lumping is bad.
I'm sad I can't use it for a mosasaur, honestly.
Big dead lizard.
Yeah.
All right, maybe we'll free it up.
I mean, listen, the ICZN has a lot of rules, and I think in general they're pretty good at maintaining stability, but one rule that I kind of wish wasn't one, or I wish there was a provision to avoid names that are like jokes at the expense of the prior authors. Like,
no,
that's such a
funny.
bullshit. Like there's 8 like the finger bone. No, not really. There's like a handful of bones from an abelosaur that have been named Thanos, and if that's allowed, if naming a nothing of a fossil after like a pink guy, you can do a funny name.
No, I think funny names are fine. I think when they're intended to make fun of the person who had previously studied the specimen,
Also fine.
I think it's not great. But anyway, I mean, I think the main thing is like when it's more confusing, like the storied Brontosaurus Apatosaurus situation. Clearly the right thing was to just make it all Brontosaurus. Now they're split and they seem to be distinct, which is cool. But like one was in use, but did not meet the definition for being a protected name. Like clearly the easiest thing for everybody involved would have been to say, like, okay, this is probably the same thing as Apatosaurus that was found first, but Apatosaurus was a lot less complete. We're going to go with Brontosaurus and kind of just disregard Apatosaurus.
Another Marsh W 100 years later.
Well, he played both sides, so he always came out on top.
He always comes out on top. I'm going to...
If you name all of the potentially synonymous things with all the things you find, your name gets preserved no matter what. Okay. Is there anything else to say systematically?
Not really.
No.
Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up?
I mean, we can talk about, like, there's the stuff it lived with. Like, there's so few Triassic animals in the game. We probably, unless they add, like, Postosuchus or something in, like, the next DLC, which I would love. That would be so cool. Man, if they gave us some Triassic... Now I'm just
What if they gave us Ephygia? That'd be cool.
Ephygia?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the problem?
Is that how it's said?
I think so.
I think so. Yeah, because it's named after an effigy.
That's so disappointing.
Have you been saying Ephygia?
Yeah, because it sounds better with O'Keefeii or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, that's
a minor stunlock we could go on. That Ghost Ranch for paleontologists is famous for, SEE-lophysis and other cool friends. A lot of people probably are more familiar with Ghost Ranch of being the like a favorite haunt of very good artists, Georgia O'Keeffe, who, if you're ever in Santa Fe, there's a Georgia O'Keeffe museum that I am a vocal person who's not the biggest fan of art museums. If it doesn't have a dinosaur in it, I hesitate to give it the title of museum. But I can enjoy an art museum. But the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum is great. Like all of her shit slaps. It's really cool.
We have at the Milwaukee Art Museum, which I was at recently when I was home, has actually a pretty substantial Georgia O'Keeffe collection. Although it's more of the floral stuff instead of the, evocative stuff. But it's really, it's really good. Slaps.
Mm-hmm. I've got a print on the wall that is out of frame, but I bought it at the gift shop there because I liked it so much.
Yeah. No, Georgia
So,
O'Keeffe
we can
was
talk
great.
about what other fossils were found there.
Yeah, so Ghost Ranch is really, really important paleontologically. There's just a tremendous diversity of material from the rock units there. The rocks at Ghost Ranch belong to what's called the Chinle Formation, which is something you'll hear about a lot if you're at all interested in Triassic paleontology. Mm-hmm. The Chinle Formation appears to have been deposited over quite a lot of time. There are a couple of distinct intervals in it, so there's a lower Ghost Ranch member and a higher siltstone member of the formation. And these members are like subunits of rock formations. So the lower one is going to be older than the upper one. I don't know offhand the exact age dates that are estimated for these. It's possible that they're deposited within a small interval of time. It's possible that it's a longer interval.
Well, I think we can say it's all Norian, right? Like it's...
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's roughly the same age, but like there might be 2 million years of separation between the base and the top, right? Which is enough that you'd expect different species to be found in each one. There's a lot of fossiliferous deposits. The main area that's being currently worked, to my knowledge, is the Hayden Quarry, which was discovered in the early 2000s, and a lot of major work there was started by a collection of graduate students at the time in like the mid 2000s. And these are people who've all become quite famous and notable from doing a lot of really good work. I think it was spearheaded basically by Randy Ermis, Sterling Nesbitt, and Alan Turner as this big collaborative project. It's a cool thing. I remember a time when Alex and I had wanted to emulate that and start our own field project looking for stuff.
And then there was a hashtag pandemic. I almost said pandemic. I'm online too much.
Yeah, you're online a little bit. But it's a really cool thing because they opened a lot of new excavation at the Hayden Quarry and found a tremendous diversity of Triassic fossil material from like every group. Dinosaurs are not the most common thing. The most significant dinosaur that they found there is another early theropod named Tawa Hali, which is very SEE-lophysis-like, but I think is not part of the coelophysoid group. I think it's
No, I think it's also earlier. It's often found to be an earlier diverging
Yeah.
thing.
right, so it's an even earlier theropod. Known from a bunch of specimens also, though. Really, really wonderful.
Yeah, in addition to like these dinosaurs, right? And we're kind of treating this holistically because again, Coelophysis is from the siltstone member, you're saying, which is upper in the Chinle?
Well, the coelophysis quarry is from there.
Okay, the Coelophysis quarry. And then a lot of what we know about the Chinle is from the petrified forest member, which is apparently a little lower.
Wait,
so I've
Dalton and I, we've worked in
Yeah.
the Chinle.
We've been in the petrified forest. Yeah, we've worked in
Yeah.
the Chinle. I've done it twice. It's really nice field work because it's really like mudstone and really friable, so the rocks break apart easily. So it's you're not having to like hammer on hard rocks all day.
We dug in the poop.
We did dig in the poop. There are these weird layers that seem to kind of concentrate coprolites that may be environmentally significant, but I don't want to say too much more about that.
Sure. Yeah.
But the Chinle Formation as a whole is probably the best global, like the best in the world view of a late Triassic ecosystem. There's just so much stuff from there, and new stuff is coming out all the time. There's a current big endeavor being led by Ben Kligman to work on the small vertebrates of the Chinle Formation, which is uncovering a lot of really cool stuff. So that what is probably most famous for that recently is Fungus vermis, the funky worm, which is a stem caecilian that comes from the Chinle. And they've found like, I want to say like hundreds of them now, hundreds of parts of them.
Have they? Oh my god.
Yeah, there's so many pieces of this caecilian. I remember the first time I went to the petrified forest to do field work. Ben, it was well before it had been published, but Ben was showing me a bunch of the fossils. He's like, "Hey, we have this stem caecilian, and you can tell by the teeth and the shape of the jaw." And I was like, "That's amazing." Caecilians, for those who aren't aware, are the kind of overlooked group of amphibians that are alive today. So today there are frogs and salamanders that everyone knows and loves, and then there are these limbless, worm-looking, kind of horrifying amphibians that are called caecilians that have really crazy, funky skulls and all kinds of crazy stuff. And this is the earliest known member of that total group, which comes from the petrified forest. It comes from the Chinle Formation. But you get all kinds of stuff there. It seems to be, and I've kind of tried to emulate the environment in this enclosure. So considering Coelophysis itself is not, the Coelophysis quarry is not from petrified forest, this may or may not be an accurate representation of the Coelophysis quarry. It's probably decent, but it seems to have been a pretty lush and wet environment with lots of like a floodplain with rivers, lakes, standing bodies of water, moving bodies of water. Because we find tons of stuff that's linked to the water. We find a lot of fish. We got like lungfish, lobe-finned fish. We got coelacanths. There are sharks. There are amphibians.
In a freshwater biome?
Indeed, there are these like early freaky looking sharks. They're xenocanths, right?
The eely ones with the thin spines. I think probably hybodonts too.
Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know.
But we get like amphibians, so like the funky worm, like Fungus vermis, but there are also frogs from the caecilian, or frogs from the Chinle, and there are temnospondals, so larger amphibians, larger stem amphibians, things like Metoposaurus that we kind of affectionately refer to as a toilet bowl head because their head is about the same size and roughly the same shape of a toilet bowl. We find a lot of those. That's probably the most common thing that I found when I was there were chunks of Metoposaur. And then tons of amniotes as well. So tons of reptiles, things like Trypanosaurs, lots of Archosaurs.
Late surviving dicynodonts, so like the last of the Permian, of some of these Permian synapsid clades, and the big ones too, like Placerius. So you're probably familiar with walking with dinosaurs, but these late surviving mammal relatives. But yeah, so many Archosaurs, so many.
And weird Archosaurs, like we've got Dromomeron. So we've got like Lagurpitids, which appear to be sister group to pterosaurs.
Yes.
And there's a couple of species of those. I think there's Silosaurs,
which may or may not be early ornithischians.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of weirdness, but like we find a lot of stuff there. It's really like it's one of the biggest, I guess, success stories in terms of question-driven fieldwork.
Right.
I think there's often
I'm going to stunlock us on the cool Archosaurs.
Let me defend our field for a moment in case any people who are have a future in government are watching this video.
Oh, good idea.
So I think there's often a, what's the right word? Kind of a misconception that paleontologists are not really doing science, that would just like to go out and dig. And I think there are some people who really do, like, a lot of paleontologists do thrive in the field and really like it. But, like, when we go out and dig, we're looking for material to answer scientific questions. And a large part of developing a field program is trying to identify the rock units that will be able to answer those questions. So, we're not just, like, going out looking for stuff.
Have you considered that we need to mine uranium out of those?
Right. Anyway, I guess what I'm saying is that the beginning of work in the Hayden Quarry, which has like really kept the Chinle at the forefront of our understanding of Mesozoic like vertebrate evolution, amniote evolution, tetrapod evolution. I don't know what the right word is there, or what the right clade to discuss is, but it's vertebrate, right? It's a really powerful indication of just how well you can do when you have question-oriented field work, where you say, I would like to see what life looked like at this time on Earth. Let me identify the rock units that might have a chance of answering that question. Going and working for a long time. And I mean, it took years for these fossils to initially be published. It took a lot of time to find things and study them and prepare them and all of that. But now there's been this constant stream of just wonderful stuff coming out. Like, that's how this works. That's where new data comes from.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I will plug the like taking a lot of time and work as like this is a major success. Not only the Hayden Quarry, but jumping to petrified forest. This is a major success of the National Park Service, of having permanent paleontologists on staff there who are throughout the year, with and without external like interns and other institutions coming and doing field work in that park. But there are people there year round who are doing field work for as much time as the weather allows. And it is for that reason that we are getting this abundance of good material, because at any given time you go out in the field, you may get lucky and find something great, or you may find a bunch of fragmentary stuff that may or may not turn out to be something. And so the more time that you can spend out in a given place, the more volume of high quality, scientifically important material you're going to be able to find.
Right.
They were also all really nice and cool at Petrified National Forest. The park paleontologists.
Petrified Forest National Park. Do you want to try that again?
No.
Okay.
They were the sentiment is not what it was called. It's that the people that worked there were cool and
very nice,
intelligent and nice. Yes.
And it's a shame that other national parks don't have, I think, quite the same support in that degree. Like, there are many national parks that include fossiliferous areas. I think that maybe there should be somebody in charge of monitoring all of them. Like, every single one should have a dedicated team. It's part of the resources of the park in the same way the wildlife is.
Give us that job. Make that job and get
several of them do. Like Badlands has on staff full-time paleo.
Yeah.
All right, you work there, right?
Dinosaur National Monument. Hey,
it's after a cut of something that we decided to remove. But we're going to talk a little bit more about just an itty bitty bit more about the Chinle. And Dalton listed, kind of went through that there are a ton of really cool groups. There are also plants in a section that Amelia will record and will cut. So just take our word for it that we did cut it. You won't hear it. But yeah, so the Triassic is really like cool. Dermatoposaurs, great. Like straggle synapsids, great. Whatever. And they're early dinosaurs. Oh wow, great, cool. No, they're important. And very earlier in the video, we kind of talked about how coelophysoids have this global distribution, and there is something to the fact that all of the dinosaurs in the late Triassic look the same, even if you find them like 1,000 miles apart, because it's all one big continent. But much more interesting than dinosaurs, mid, fine, cool, crocs, and croc relatives, and also archosaurs that aren't particularly closely related to crocs. You get them all. So in the Chinle, you get Trialephosaurs, which are these kind of lizardy, very early archosaur morphs. Pardon me. And there's a very interesting distribution with these. In our Herrerasaurus video, we talk a little bit about, oh God, what do we talk? With the weird pigs, Hyperodapodon. Yes, thank you. Rhynchosaurs. My brain farted. And there's, like, in the southern hemisphere, you find a lot of them, but apparently in parts of the northern hemisphere, you find more Trilophosaurs. There is overlap, but these are herbivores. There are all sorts of Archosaur forms, so phytosaurs are all over the place. This is a group of crocky-looking Archosaur reforms. They're not crocodilians, and depending on your phylogeny, they're not even in the croc line. They're sometimes outside of it. And they have these long, freaky faces, sometimes these hooked rostrums, and you can tell them apart from your average crocodilian because their nares are on top of their head. They have a long snout, and then halfway up their snout is their nose, as opposed to crocs, where it's at the end. But they were doing croc things. They appear to be semi-aquatic, feeding on all sorts of things. Some of them, like Smilasuchus, are pushing 8 meters, so like giants that were probably the top predators of their respective environment. And then you get into the croc, and so Jimbo talked about the Leucobratids and kind of these very generalized early theropods and Pospicilosaurs. But on the croc line, there's this just incredible diversity that makes you go, wow. So herbivorous crocodilians, like we talked about in the Herrerasaur video, these Edosaurs, very early relatives of Edosaurs, or close relatives of Edosaurs called Reveltosaurus. Very early crocodilomorphs like Hesperosuchus, so small leggy crocs that were running around eating small vertebrates. And probably what were the biome's top predators, large paracrocodilomorphs like Costosuchus, which were kind of filling the theropod niche. So just kind of the staggering diversity of Archosaurs, and so little of it dinosaurs. So, you know, like the age of the dinosaurs starts in the Triassic, technically, but not really. Oh, and Van Clevia, a super armored eel thing.
Van Clevia looks like it came out of Peter Jackson's King Kong.
It's so cool. And I don't know if it's published, but there's apparently a giant one. Is that published? So like Van Clevia, I think, is like 1.5 meters. But there's apparently like fossils from one that suggest it's like an animal pushing 5 meters.
Oh my God.
It looks like a monster. It looks like someone took like the head of a moray eel and like stitched it on the body of an alligator and then stretched the alligator's body. It's, you know, this little horrible monster that lived in the water. And it wasn't even the worst thing in the water. There were phytosaurs like twice as large. So yeah, just kind of this.
There is published information of Van Clevia getting up to 3.86 meters.
Okay. So I'll say that is maybe what I'm thinking of.
I mean,
I'm sorry, what is this thing? I'm sorry to interrupt. I just Googled it because I thought I remembered.
It's a short little monster.
No, I know it's a little monster. I've got the photo. Like, what is it phylogenetically?
It's an Archosaur form, and it's believed that it's closely related to Dossuelids.
I don't know what that is.
Which I'm going to tell you. Which are another group of kind of these convergent Archosaur forms that kind of converge on crocodilian anatomy, long snouts, scaly. What is the group's name that are sister to them? Oh my God, my brain is full of holes. I think I need to sleep.
Are you thinking of Protochampsids?
Protochampsids, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Which may have been semi-aquatic or a little more terrestrial than phytosaurs. But yeah, so it seems that things are making the crocodile shape over and over and over again. So before Archosaurs make birds all the time, the machine in the Archosaur factory is going crocodile, 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 crocodile. And then they get a new floor manager, and he's like, no, this is no good. Nobody wants crocodiles no more. It's the Jurassic. Birds, birds. And they, yes, sir, birds, birds, birds. And that's how Archosaur evolution works.
Van Clevia is a terrifying looking animal with all those
so
like
good.
huge canine-like teeth.
Are like stupid.
It reminds me of a plesiosaur. The skull specifically. I'm like, oh, that's an elasmosaur. It's not. Or
No,
is
yeah.
it? I don't know.
It's
Could
not
it
the
be?
monster energy of
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Alex, didn't you have a list that you wanted to share with us?
Oh yes, just for a little bit of fun.
Oh yeah.
the Ghost Ranch has these nice, big, bright red cliffs. And as our resident film pervert, I would be remiss to not list some of the films that I found on Wikipedia. I knew some of these, but I just wanted to... It's funnier if we say a bunch of them. So in chronological order of a partial list of films that were shot at Ghost Ranch, I haven't heard a lot about these, but The Light That Failed, a movie called And Now Miguel, which apparently included Ghost Ranch staff members. Showdown, the famous 1984 film Red Dawn.
Oh.
Silverado, Outrageous Fortune, City Slickers, The Last Outlaw, Earth 2, Wyatt Earp, Wild Wild West, now there's a film, All the Pretty Horses, The Missing, No Country for Old Men, one of the greatest movies ever made. The 3:10 to Yuma, another pretty good movie. The Worst of the Indiana Jones movies was filmed here. A TV movie about Georgia O'Keeffe. Year One, Brothers, Cowboys and Aliens, awesome. The Lone Ranger, not great.
The movie that killed Gore Verbinski's career. Wow, I can't even say it. The movie that killed Gore Verbinski's career.
Cosmos, A Space-Time Odyssey, and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which was a Netflix movie. And now that I'm reading it, I can remember the exact sequence that's shot here. And it's a really fun little kind of anthology series about the West. So yeah, it's this very picturesque location that's good for some background shots and establishing shots.
Man,
That's
Year
nice.
One, huh?
Yeah.
That's
They're not all good movies that are shot at.
No, I didn't say they were all good movies. Some really good ones, but
that's real
some
rough.
stinkers.
Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, now that we've talked about anything except SEE-lophysis, should we rank SEE-lophysis?
Let's spin the wheel. Let's do it. Let's rank it.
Let's rank it.
Let's DJ.
Let's not even rank it. Let's just spin the wheel. All right, to the species viewer we go.
Okay, so Amelia, you want to take a first stab at rating this?
Sure.
Before we rate it-
Let
Sorry.
me. What?
Oh. There's one little tiny thing I want to point out because I hope it will help other people. It'll make other people as happy as I am about this model.
Yeah.
Which is that they don't have an actual hole for it because I think that'd be hard to do in how they've constructed the meshes. But you can like very distinctly see where the ear is supposed to be.
Oh,
Oh, look at that.
you can listen.
I really like that.
He hears
Look,
you.
listener.
He can hear Awa's voice. Ooh, I didn't even look at the little hands.
Oh, he's
The
so
wrists are good.
yeah.
Does he have a fourth digit, though?
I don't know how visible that fourth metacarpal would have been.
Yeah, I'm going to pull open the paper just to see.
Sure.
But I think you're probably right that it would be very... No, it has a phalanx.
No?
Oh, okay.
So I think there would have been a tiny little vestigial nubbin.
Okay, can I talk about it now?
Yeah.
No.
All right. It's very cute. I like it a lot. It looks exactly like how I imagine it should look. You know, just based on the skeletons. I don't know what that means really. I don't know. I like it a lot. It looks like a guy. It looks like a little guy. They've got the little notch in the face. He's got cute little grabby hands. It's kind of lanky. It looks very fast. Man, I'm torn. I don't know. I don't know if I want to give it an S. I kind of do. Because it's cute.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I'll give it an S. I think it's perfect. Like, for what it is, it's like, yeah, this is a little fast thing that runs around and is mean. And I think it captures that very well. I'll give it an S.
Okay.
So I know that accuracy is not supposed to be our criterion for this.
Mhm.
But as a paleontologist, I can't help but notice it, right? This is in general a pretty good model. I don't think I've seen an undistorted SEE-lophysis skull. And so I don't know if the profile is exactly correct, but I don't know if anybody really knows if it's exactly correct. Right? Material from Ghost Ranch is often a little crushed up. In terms of the only real inaccuracy is the hands. The hands and the lack of feathers. Lack of feathers is common to almost everything, so I'm not going to let that penalize it. I would love to see a vestigial little nubbin of a fourth digit, just because that's a cool detail.
Jimbo,
What?
where did you rank Herrerasaurus?
A.
Okay.
This feels like an A tier design to me. I think there's nothing incredibly standout about it, although I admit that it's maybe at the top of my A tier ranking because it's beautiful. It's just not like... It's not memorable. It's partially not memorable just because it looks right for what it is. But I'd say it's about equivalent to how I feel about Herrerasaurus.
Okay. So an A from you?
A for me, yeah. Alex, also your camera's a little high.
How's that?
Much better.
So yeah, I mean, like, this is a good rig. I think the skull shape is pretty good. I wish it had a little nub, but that didn't bother me too much in a Herrerasaurus, and at least the arms are proportionally nice, and the hands are held correctly. I like its long wiggly tail, and honestly, this does more for me than Herrerasaurus, in that Herrerasaurus, like we kind of talk about this in the video, but it's like, it's very generic. It's like a dinosaur because it is the dinosaur, so to speak, in a lot of ways. Whereas SEE-lophysis to me feels very like, oh, this is a very early theropod, but it's also such like a specific look and attitude to it, just long and pointy. And I really like this model, and it's a model. Can I see it face head on?
Oh, I thought my internet had just dropped again.
Look at that. Like, the only thing holding it back from me isn't even its own fault, which is just that I like the walking with dinosaur color scheme is so iconic for me.
Yeah, it is.
And I do wish it had some kind of feathery integument. But, like, if there was going to be a theropod in the game that's not feathery, like, there's some Spinosaurs, Ceratosaurs in this. So I think I got to go with a very low S or a high A. I'll say an S. I'll be generous today. I like SEE-lophysis quite a bit, just as like a dinosaur, but also I think this design is good. I'm going to say A. I lied. I've changed it to A. The finger bothered me.
That's stupid. It didn't bother you on Herrerasaurus, but it bothers you.
I think I also put Herrerasaurus as an A.
That's fair, but still stupid. S for stupid. This is like so clearly an S tier design for me. I'm kind of flabbergasted that we didn't flat out S this.
Wait, hold on. Is my A going to make this a tie?
It is.
Okay, I changed it.
Wait. Let me text Scott.
Oh, okay.
Never mind.
Okay.
It's 2 a.m. where he is.
Oh,
I've changed it to an S.
Yes, democracy. It's an S for me. Like, this is like a great representation of SEE-lophysis. It does, like James, you were saying, we're not 100% sure if the skull is true to life, but it's certainly at least true to the fossil record.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very clearly SEE-lophysis. I'm not bothered about the nubbin because I am not unconvinced that perhaps like all of their theropod models for some reason kind of have to have 3 fingers. It may be a technical thing as opposed to an artistic thing. I don't know. And while I do wish it had its striped leggings, one thing I do want to say is like basically every color configuration for this slaps in its own unique way. Like, they're all really pretty, and the stripes they gave it, a lot of the colors really pop. Like it's a tremendous design, I think. And it's an S for me.
All right. Not only, this is not me not liking to lose, but I've been swayed by thinking about all the color designs because I had forgotten like how many different variations there are that just look great. And I thought about one other detail, which is that I make sure that this is in every park I make in this game. And I think that should say something. I usually try to reserve my S rating for things that are like very visually unique, which is why I went with A. But I'll go with S too. We'll make it S's across the board.
Hot dog. The other thing, it's hard to notice in the species viewer, but I noticed it in the in game. Its eyes really feel alive. I don't know. I haven't really looked at that in a lot of the other models, so I don't know if that's a universal thing, but I really was like, oh, this is like a creature.
Yeah, it feels real. This would be an acceptable paleo art design.
Yeah, and I think that's like part of what I was trying to articulate and couldn't, is that like the way that it's kind of wiggly and twitchy, like it feels like a small reptile in that way. Oh my god, he's so polite.
Like his tail's twitching.
Yeah. It's like my cat.
All right, so it's an S. I'm going to rate it as an S.
Nice.
Okay, SEE-lophysis is officially S tier.
Good.
Okay, everybody.
Is it time?
Oh, yeah. Are you ready
good.
to spin the wheel? Are we prepared?
Yes.
So we're going to spin the wheel. But for our viewers, we're not going to get to this animal for a little while because otherwise it would come out on the day we are doing our charity live stream that we'll reiterate is happening. So you might have to wait a little while for this guy. On the plus side, that'll allow Scott to be back when we record it, and we know you all miss him very much. Scott is really the glue that holds the channel together. We're fraying in his absence. We're looking forward to having him back. So with no further ado, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Spin.
That
It's
wheel.
already spinning.
Wheel?
It's spinning.
Okay.
Oh my god.
No way!
What are the odds?
It's
Dear
impossible.
viewer, before this video, we were discussing what we would do next. And
This is great. This is poetry. Oh my god.
for the stream, it would be good.
So I guess do we want to discuss what we were planning on doing for
All
the
right.
stream?
Yeah, well, now we'll announce we're going to do Indominus Rex for the stream.
Yeah.
And we planned that hours ago. And this is perhaps...
That's wild.
This is really funny. I'm going to remove Indominus Rex from the wheel, and we're going to spin for what comes afterward. Because we'll probably have to record that before the stream, given our schedule. So I'm going to just remove that now. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
If we get Indoraptor, I will eat my hat.
Oh, come on.
Round and round it goes. Okay.
It's
we're
not.
Ooh.
Oh.
Oh.
Okay.
I don't think we've had any Allosauroids yet, have we?
It depends on where Monolophosaurus goes.
No.
All right. Well, shut up, dweeb.
Yeah.
But yes. Sorry.
It's okay.
My gut reaction is to be cruel.
I know. It's okay.
Oh,
I've
that's
known you
cool.
for a
That'll
long
be
time,
fun.
Alex. Yeah. Yeah. So that's it for this episode of Paleontologist Rank. We will see you on June 17th for our live stream, where we will, I guess completely now by random chance, have gotten the opportunity to do a live reaction to Indominus Rex, which is a very famous hybrid from the movie series. And then after the live stream, you will get to see all of our thoughts on another giant theropod dinosaur, but this time one that really existed, Carcharodontosaurus. Remember, all of you, that if you like these videos, it really means a lot to us if you remember to like and comment and subscribe. Seeing the channel grow is really great. We work really hard on these videos, and we like it when we see our hard work reflected back at us in viewer engagement. So please like and comment and subscribe if you like our videos, is what I'm saying. Unfortunately, we do have to tell you to do that because as YouTubers, it's part of our contract, and they will shoot our pets if we don't do it. So YouTube gives and it takes away. So thank you all again. We'll see you next time in our charity live stream.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good evening, everybody.
I think I think for whatever poor bastard has to edit it,
It's going to be a hard one to edit.
I think it's going to be an
gonna be
annoying
bad.
edit. Well, because it's 2 hours long.